My name is Lowell Wyse. I'm the Assistant Director of Tacoma Tree Foundation. I'm here with my colleague, Horacio Perez-Morales. He is our tree care specialist. And welcome. This webinar is focused on grit city trees and especially how to apply, because sometimes it's not always easy to understand the process for getting trees into your neighborhood and using a program like this. So this webinar is meant to help you to understand the whole process and make it easy for you and hopefully get some questions answered as well. So today we're going to be talking about where you start with this whole application process. We'll be talking especially about the group applications because it's a great way to work with your neighbors to build community and bring some more green to your neighborhood. We'll be talking about utilities and other considerations when you are choosing where to put your tree. We'll be talking about tree size and selection. And then finally, the application paperwork. What does the actual application look like? How do you do it, etc. Okay, let's get started. So it's important that you know, first of all, that Grit City Trees is a program from the City of Tacoma. It is for City of Tacoma residents only. So if you live in, I guess, Ruston or Lakewood or some other municipality, you're probably not going to be eligible for this program. So it's for City of Tacoma property. And we are here. We are the Tacoma Tree Foundation, a nonprofit that focuses on trees and community-based greening across the whole Tacoma area. So it's important that you know too that Grit City Trees is for trees in what's called the right of way. This is public property between the street and your home. And these trees are designated specifically for those areas. So as I say, we are partners of the City of Tacoma, but we're a separate entity and we're working with individuals and our neighbors here to bring more trees to Tacoma. One of our most important focuses, and one thing I would like you to take away from this, is the idea of tree equity. This is a map of Tacoma that overlays the number of trees or the amount of tree cover that each neighborhood has with data from the Equity Office at the City of Tacoma about racial and ethnic diversity and also economic diversity. So if you look at this map, the larger dots on the map are areas with large tree cover. So you can see at the top upper left, Point Defiance has a lot of trees, so it has a large dot. Small dots mean less tree coverage. And then at the same time, the shading, the coloration of the map indicates where there are lots of communities of color and people with low incomes. So you can see from this is how we're deciding where to prioritize the tree planting. And people that are in areas of high need for tree equity are going to be prioritized in the Grit City Trees program. So if you live generally in South Tacoma, South End, East Side, Hilltop, some of those areas are high priorities for the City of Tacoma and high priorities for us as Tacoma Tree Foundation for creating a more fair tree canopy cover that protects everybody from the summer heat wave like we're having this weekend. Additional background is here on this video from the City of Tacoma that talks about how the city developed. And it's important to know that certain areas of the city, as was the case with many cities across the country, the city was developed unequally. Investments were not equal across the city. And there was a process of housing discrimination. And we see a correlation between areas that were redlined in the past and areas that lack tree protections now in the present. So if you have a minute, this is a great informative video. I think Horacio is going to share it in the chat. Okay, when you go to the City of Tacoma webpage, cityoftacoma.org/gritcitytrees, this is what you're going to find. And the important thing is what I have highlighted here and put in the arrow down below. So you have the application available for download as a PDF or as a Microsoft Word document. And in addition, we have 2 links for downloading the application in Spanish and in English. And so just for your information, we're also doing a webinar this morning in Spanish at 11 o'clock. And the city has provided this bilingual version this year, which is really exciting. So this is where you go to actually download the application. You can choose between PDF and Word document version. Talking to neighbors. Now, why do we like group applications? Group applications are the best for Grit City trees because it provides extra benefits in addition to that tree that goes in front of your house. But it's not always easy to talk to neighbors, especially if you're not that friendly, you're not that comfortable with other people in your neighborhood. So it's important to do a little bit of research, a little bit of homework first before you go and have that first conversation about bringing trees to the neighborhood. The first suggestion we have is just to kind of look around your neighborhood, go for a walk around the block, and find those open spaces where you think that trees could go. Keep in mind that trees are not always appropriate in every single spot. So notice too how the space is being used. And for example, there are some rights of way where people park their cars. And if it's a parking spot that people have used for a long time, they might not be open to trying a tree in that particular spot. At the same time, you never know. It doesn't hurt to ask. I have a neighbor who I thought would not be open to trees because she parks her truck there. And then I talked to her and she said, yes, I've really been wanting to put trees in the ground here. So it's not necessarily a deal breaker, but just be aware that how people use their own property is sometimes a personal decision. So not everyone's going to be open to having trees or to adjusting their behaviors. We'll talk more about the idea of power lines and utilities, but it's very important that you know before you dig a hole anywhere in Tacoma that you have to locate the utilities first. One additional point here is that COVID-19 obviously makes it more challenging to approach people in your neighborhood who you don't know. So our suggestion would be to start with people in your neighborhood who you have contact information for already. So if you've got a phone number or an email from a nearby neighbor, that would be a great place to start. Just reach out, send a text, send an email, whatever, find out their interest level. If you don't know any of your neighbors, or if you don't know most of your neighbors, you could definitely try writing a note because sometimes approaching, knocking on the door can be uncomfortable for people. So you could try first by writing a note and putting your contact information and saying, reach out to me if you are interested in this group application idea, right? Keep in mind that for the group application, you need to find a minimum of 3 applicants and 10 trees. So if I'm applying for Grit City Trees with my neighbors, I need to find 2 neighbors, and among the 3 of us, we need to find space for 10 trees. That's kind of the basis for the group application. Okay, so again, a little bit more in depth about how we think about these community conversations. First of all, we think it's important at Tacoma Tree Foundation that we lead with the intention to connect. So in other words, the goal of this conversation should just be to form a connection with your neighbor. And again, to build a sense of community. It shouldn't be you approaching and telling someone what they need. So we're focusing on building relationships here. And in this sense, the trees are secondary. Of course, it's our goal to have trees in as many places as possible across the city. But ultimately, the relationships are more important. So it might involve kind of letting go of an agenda and thinking about this as a kind of collaboration process. And in addition, I always think it's important to focus on a sense of shared values. When it comes to trees, one shared value is simply the beauty of the neighborhood, the quality of life that everybody aspires to in the neighborhood, things like community health. Trees are great with air pollution, air quality, water quality. So focusing on what you all want together as a neighborhood is something that can help you to connect and then ultimately might lead to opportunities for tree planting. Along these same lines, it's important to listen to other people, obviously. So not just going in with your agenda again, but focusing on listening to the other people, finding out where they are. and just see where that develops. This might be a long-term process, okay? So it might be the case that you approach neighbors this year and they don't seem that interested, but maybe over time, maybe next year, they become more interested in a group application because they understand where you're coming from and you feel that shared sense of values. So just focusing on being a listener primarily, understanding where the other people are coming from, that can go a long way to building connection and building community. And the last point is to kind of approach this with a sense of gratitude. So thanking the neighbor for their time. Thanks for being here or coming to this meeting that you've called maybe at your house, and just being grateful for their involvement, their participation. Okay, so stepping back from the group applications for a moment, the rest of the information here is for anyone interested, whether it's an individual or a group. So the rest of this applies to everybody. The first thing to think about is utilities. As we talked about, there are utilities in the right of way. That means underground, buried cables, buried water lines and gas lines, internet, things like that. So it's very important to know exactly where those resources are and try to avoid planting a tree really close to those important utilities. So it's important to use a couple of resources. You can check this map, the DART map that the City of Tacoma has, which I think will go in the chat here momentarily. You can click this and actually see a map, locate your house, and find out what the obvious utilities are. The next step is going to be to actually call before you dig. So before you put the shovel in the ground, you must locate these utilities, and it's a free service. You call 811, or you also could do it online as an online request, and the companies will actually send they'll send people by to mark utility lines. And you'll notice in a few days there'll be maybe a blue line for water, a different color line for gas, and so on. And they'll actually paint on the ground where your utilities are located. Okay. So definitely do this before you think about planting a tree or digging a hole. This is just a visual of what the DART map looks like. So you'll locate your house, you'll see different colored lines, and you'll be able to judge approximately where these things go and estimate where a tree might be available to plant. This is the call before you dig.org website. And so it looks like this. It also has the list of colorations for every single type of a utility line that might exist in your right of way. Another thing to consider is the exact location. And so this is information from the City of Tacoma with recommendations for the distances in feet from each type of infrastructure. Now, of course, trees are a type of infrastructure too, but we want to make sure that we place them in such a way that it's not going to cause conflicts or interferences in the future. So things like having them 25 feet from the street corner, 15 feet from a utility pole, 5 feet from your driveway, etc. These are recommendations based on kind of best practices for where to locate these trees. Now, one of the most important things is actually which tree to request. And I'm sure a lot of you are interested in this idea of which trees are going to be available. So I have good news and bad news about that. The bad news is that you can only request at this time, at this point in the process, the size of tree, small, medium, or large. At a later point in the process, once the city has ordered and had the trees available, then you'll be able to choose, hopefully among a couple of options or 3 or 4 options based on the size that you selected. Remember that the largest trees actually have the most long-term community benefits. When we're talking about providing shade and cooling in the summertime like this, we're talking about, again, air quality and water quality and just having more pleasant kind of walking experience in your neighborhood. Large trees obviously provide the most benefit. So if you don't have overhead utility lines like power lines, it would be great if you consider a large tree. The other thing to consider with a large tree is the size of your planting area or planting strip. So more about details about that in a second. If you do have overhead utility lines, a smaller tree is definitely going to work better because it will not grow so high that it interferes with the power lines.
And Lowell, we got
Yes.
a question in the chat from Andy Rush.
Okay.
And the question reads, who monitors where trees are located, i.e. too close to road signs? They're seeing trees blocking signs all over their neighborhood.
That's a great question. So who actually monitors it? I think in the case of an individual application, there might not be someone coming by necessarily to enforce where the tree is located. So it's going to be kind of up to you to choose based on the information that we just presented, how far to put it and exactly where to put it. What will happen if you are in a group application, the city will actually be coming by to bring the trees by. So you may be able to consult with those folks about the exact location. And if you have any questions about, the distances, I would definitely just encourage you to contact the City of Tacoma directly. So when you submit your application, mention that you're not sure maybe about the distance or the location from a certain spot, and they can help you make sure you put it in the right place.
And is it the Office of Urban Forestry that would go to?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Office of Urban Forestry.
Right. So if Andy, you've seen like some trees obstruct some, I don't know, some very important signs, maybe like giving a tip to that office would be a good idea.
Yeah. Great. Thanks for that question. Okay, moving on. These are just some examples of types of trees that have been offered in the past. So when it comes to the large trees, there's a difference between the deciduous and the evergreen trees. And these are two examples, the yellowwood and the Kentucky coffee tree. This is kind of an example of what might happen. The city will say, okay, we were able to purchase a large batch of these two large deciduous trees this year. And so here's what's available, which one would you prefer? That's sort of how the process is going to work. Evergreen shade trees are the big conifers like cedars and Douglas firs. And again, these are kind of iconic around Tacoma. And if you have space, these kind of trees are very beneficial. So I would encourage everyone to consider putting a large conifer tree. And keep in mind that there's a spot on the application, which I'll show you in a minute, that indicates that you are willing or interested in having an evergreen tree. So deodar cedar and Vanderwolf pyramid pine are examples of larger evergreen shade trees that have been used in the past that you might be able to have a chance to select this year. And then again, we have smaller trees, small and medium trees that can work for underneath power lines based on the size that they grow to at maturity. So the Persian ironwood, Japanese white pines, those are options for underneath power lines. And I think it's cool, something like a Japanese white pine is still an evergreen, which provides color year round, but it doesn't grow to the height that it will interfere with those power lines that you have or may have in your right of way. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the application. I'm going to switch my screen here and show you a different document really quickly, just so you know what to expect. The document is about 10 pages long. There's a lot of information. It includes a contract. So I just want you to be familiar with it and not feel daunted by the process that you're facing. Keep in mind with the application form, actually, I'll come back to this in a second. Let me go ahead and switch my screen over and I'll share the application now. All right, can you see the document, Horacio?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so this is what the English version of the application looks like in Microsoft Word. It's got all the background information, where you can find out more A really important section here is the timeline. So notice we're here in August and September. Planting season is really in the fall. So we are doing this now, so you have all the information. You can do some preparation, maybe talk to your neighbors, and then the trees will be available more like in October and at the end of October. So just keep this this thing in mind. And it's also important to know with the group application, in case I didn't mention this, one of the best reasons to do the group application is that the city will actually have the trees delivered to your area. So you'll choose someone to be kind of a block captain, and you can receive the trees in your area instead of having to drive out to the nursery where the trees are located. So it saves you a trip if you're able to get those friends together and get 10 trees or more. So keep in mind about this calendar. The other thing to note is that there will be some follow-up next spring after your trees have been planted. The city or the Washington Conservation Corps will be providing watering supplies for you so that you can get ready for the dry season, make sure you keep that tree healthy and happy. So again, here are the options for receiving the free trees for the right-of-way. Group applications and individual applications are both on the same form. So every property owner involved in this process, if you're doing a group application, still needs to fill out the individual form. The reason is that there's a contract that we'll see below that everybody needs to sign. And so regardless if you're in a group or not, everyone needs to fill out the form. And to submit the application, you're going to have options sending it by email to trees@cityoftacoma.org, or you can send it by hard copy to this address. Finally, there's some more information here about planting day suggestions. So maybe you are not sure how to plant a tree. I think we actually have a video on our YouTube page, Tacoma Tree Foundation, about tree planting. So kind of demystifying that process. But you'll also be able to have access to the city's urban forestry team. They can send you information about tree planting. And actually, if you apply for Grit City Trees, you'll be receiving more information. We're not going to leave you in the dark. So if you've never planted a tree, you'll have plenty of opportunity to learn. But the basic tools you'll need will include just a shovel and gloves, maybe a tarp to hold the soil, and a way to water it. Keep in mind too that if you don't have a shovel, the nonprofit Tacoma Tool Library is really cool because you don't have to buy the tools. You can actually just check out a tool for free, and it's a great resource for the community. There's more information, as I said, about proper planting practices at City of Tacoma Urban Forestry website, and I'll let you kind of follow through with that for now. So moving on quickly, a couple other considerations. We've already talked about the DART map and the utility request. Make sure you call before you dig. And then finally, we come to the application. So this is where you actually enter your personal information. You are entering, most importantly, the number of trees that you're requesting, whether they're power lines or not, etc. You need to include the evidence that you did your utility locate. And then here is another factor. If you are a renter, you are welcome to apply for Grit City Trees, but keep in mind that the person who needs to sign the permission form here is the landowner, the property owner. So as long as your landlord is okay with the installation of a few trees, the city is not going to say that you can't apply and receive these Grit City Trees. So I think that's great that we're supporting renters as well. Another box to be aware of here, you can check if you want more help with planting. You can check this box if you want to hear from us at Tacoma Tree Foundation with more information or more suggestions about the group application process, or if you just want to contact us as well. And then if you have the neighborhood application, this box is really important here because you're identifying who the contact person is for your little group.
So real quick before we get onto this page, for the utility locate number, that's something that we find on the Dart map, correct?
I think that is actually the number that comes from the confirmation. Like you'll get a confirmation code when you enter your request for the utility locate.
Okay.
I think that's what that refers to. So if you do it by email, they'll kind of send you an email in response that says they've received your request, and there's probably a number in that that is what you enter. They're just looking for the sign that you've followed through with the whole process, and the utility locate is a big part of the process. Good question. Okay, then finally you request your trees, and the important thing here is considering how much space you have available, like we've already talked about, and then at the bottom, entering the number of trees that you want of each type. So for example, 2 large trees, 2 small trees. That would be, you would list that information right here. And then this box is very important if you're interested in receiving evergreen trees. So the city is kind of separating and trying to estimate how many evergreen trees they can request in a particular year. This information is also really helpful, I think, because not everybody's right-of-way looks the same. The right-of-way is the area between the street and the property line, technically. Some of those areas have sidewalks, some of them don't. So you can look at this sort of diagram, which will show you where the planting is available. And if you see here, the marks with diagonals is kind of where you're not allowed to plant grit city trees. And these white areas are where it is the tree is going to go. So in the case where there's a house without a planting strip and a sidewalk is there, it'll go right here between the sidewalk and the property line. In the case where there's no sidewalk at all, it'll go here kind of closer to the street. Okay, so it's important to know what type of property you have and where the trees can go, because these street trees are only allowed to go in the street area and not in your yard. Here is the contract that the city is asking you to sign. You should read it carefully. The message here is that once you plant the tree is your property and your responsibility, even though it's on the right of way, the public property, okay? The city has an approach that says that the ownership and the responsibility of the actual tree belongs to the property owner. So when you sign this, you're saying that you don't hold the city responsible for the care and maintenance of the tree. So this is a very important form, and if you don't feel comfortable with that, then you're not going to be able to receive your free trees. The last page here is a checklist, just showing that you've done everything, making sure that you followed all the steps. Okay, so that's the end. I've got a couple more slides here on the PowerPoint, so I'm going to switch back over. All right, so again, you finish your application, you submit it. If you're doing a group application, you're going to submit all those applications in the same packet. So maybe the same envelope with the hard copies, or in the same email, if you can figure out those logistics, to attach all your neighbors' applications together for the group application. I already sort of covered this, but trees are available in October, so we're still a couple months away. And someone will be contacting you about the actual options once the city knows what trees are available. If you decide that the street tree option is not the best fit for you, and you want trees for your backyard or maybe on the side of your house or something, I recommend going to our website that we've created, treesfortacoma.org, and you can find out about other incentives programs for getting trees. So there's the tree coupon program. The urban tree sale from Pierce Conservation District is actually coming up very soon. And then we at Tacoma Tree Foundation often have tree giveaways and plant giveaways, and we don't have restrictions on where those trees can go. So these are other options if you decide street trees are not for you, or you want more trees, even more than just the street trees, right? So that's all the information that we have prepared in the presentation. All of our information is here in the last slide. Please check us out at tacomatreefoundation.org. You can find us on social media, on Facebook and Instagram. and YouTube as well. As I mentioned, this video is going to be posted on YouTube later, and I hope that it'll become a resource for everybody in the future for understanding how this process works. So again, stay cool, plant lots of trees, and keep in touch with us. If there are any questions, now's the time to ask. Do we have any more questions in the chat, Horacio?
No, not currently.
All right. I'm going to do a quick check of the email because I said that was an option for sending questions.
Les has got a question, and the question is, what type of trees?
All you have kind of control over at this point in the process is the size of the tree. So you can request a small tree, a medium tree, or a large tree. You can request as many as you have space for. And all of this is subject to the supply, so the availability of certain trees. What the city does is purchases these trees from local providers, local nurseries. And so it's dependent on what trees they have available in a particular year. So if you have a strong idea of a particular tree that you want to go in your right of way, like a sugar maple or a sycamore tree, this might not be the program for you, and maybe using the tree coupon program would be a better option, because we can't guarantee that a certain species of tree will be available in a particular year. What's going to happen is, if you decide to go forward with the program, you indicate the size of the tree, and then the city will present you in a few weeks with options that they have purchased. Okay, so you'll have a couple of different options. I don't know how many, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 options for each type of tree. And the smaller trees will probably be more ornamental. They may involve some, some color. The larger trees, it'll be a variety again, and you'll have the option of evergreen or deciduous trees to choose from. But unfortunately, I think this is one of the drawbacks of the program, that you can't just say, like, I want this type of tree and send it to me. It's not like a special order kind of situation. It's more like based on what's available. So that's the answer to that. You will have some selection available, but it's going to be choosing between a couple of options and not just any type of tree you can think of. Thank you everyone for coming. Thanks for your interest in trees and a green and beautiful Tacoma. We are Tacoma Tree Foundation. Please find us online and on our social media. Thanks for supporting Tacoma Tree Foundation and bringing trees to your neighborhood.